Milton graduate class of '90, which was a year before Aaron. And he was a Milton jazz student, but he's been incredibly successful with comedy writing and hosting a show and creating the show. Currently, A Million Little Things, which is an amazing hit. It's in its second season on ABC, and DJ is the creator, writer, and producer. So he and Aaron are having a little reunion.
I'm not an Aaron Goldberg fan.
We're all with
an Aaron Goldberg fan. That's all.
Yeah, I'm a DJ Nash fan. What can I say? Yeah, that's great. Hi, Dan Hurley. I'm a Dan Hurley fan, too. Hi, Dan. Yeah, I think you're muted. It looks like you're muted, too.
Probably more people will join us, but I think we should get started. So one of the things that's been really nice about the unfortunate circumstances under which we are all existing these last few months is the incredible educational opportunities and sharing opportunities online that have occurred, because we're prisoners in our home and we have not much else to do, so we have time to do things. And I've been so fortunate to go to some amazing bass conferences that had some of the greatest bass players in the world: Ron Carter, Christian McBride, Marcus Miller, Victor Wooten, Rufus Reed, John Patitucci, John Clayton. And it's just one way that we can stay connected. And in trying to create materials for my Milton Academy jazz students online, with kind of zero notice last March and April, I've been doing a lot of research online, and just thinking that it would be nice to maybe get some professional musicians who might be willing to talk and share their music. And lo and behold, on Sunday, Aaron Goldberg shows up at my house.
It was Mother's Day, and I thought I could visit my jazz mother, Bob Sincro.
And so in a discussion, I was just talking about, gee, would you be willing to come on? He said, sure. So here we are. And I'm hoping some more students will join. But, we've got who's supposed to be here is here. And so Aaron, I've got a few sort of discussion leaders that we can do, but everybody's welcome to send in questions. There's a chat session. You guys probably know how to use Zoom better than I do. So I'm wondering if we could start by, first of all, welcoming Aaron Goldberg.
Thank you.
Who's amazingly staying put for probably the first time in 20 plus years. And I'm wondering if you could just tell people who, especially our younger people who may not be as familiar with you, sort of an outline of, what you've been doing and your career journey.
Sure. Hi, everybody. So nice to see you all, and thanks for joining us. Thank you, Cindy, thank you, Bob. It's really hard for me to call Cindy by his proper name. So bear with me. I will try my best. So I happened to be on a walk on Sunday with a good friend of mine who lives in Milton, just down the street from Milton Academy. And it wasn't even my intention to walk by Cindy's house. Of course, I was thinking about him, and unbidden, she took me right past the front of Cindy's house. So I called him to make sure that he still lived in that house. and he came out and invited me, not in, but invited me into his lovely garden that his wife has been planting for the past couple of weeks. And what can I say? I mean, I would not be playing music for a living if it weren't for Bob Sincrope, if it weren't for Milton Academy, weren't for Milton Academy Jazz Program, if it weren't for DJ Nash, who I used to know as David Nash, and all the guys that I met there back in the late 80s, which really does sound like a long time ago. I knew nothing about jazz when I came to Milton Academy. I was a classical piano student. Like so many other parents, my parents thought it would be a good idea to try to raise a well-rounded kid. And in their mind, that meant their kid should play an instrument. So my sister played a little bit of cello. My parents played the piano when they were kids, so they had a piano in the house, and I took piano lessons from about age 7, classical piano lessons, and I developed a certain amount of facility for the instrument, but I never in my life even considered becoming a professional musician. And I can't say that I really fell in love with classical music the way that it was taught to me. I learned, like so many other kids, to translate notes on a page into sound. I was a decent sight reader, and I learned to play Rachmaninoff and Beethoven and Mozart, all this magnificent music, but I can't say that I really even appreciated it then. My sophomore year of high school, I was given the opportunity to take a music class for credit. I thought that sounded like a great idea. And the magic of Bob Sinekrop's jazz class is that you need no background, as you all know. And the best thing that ever happened to me was I received a cassette, a Maxell cassette with 8 songs in it from Bob Sinekrop in the mail in an envelope, with a little note that said, "Homework for first-year jazz class, listen to this cassette." And being a good student, studious 14-year-old, I did my homework, and I spent that summer listening to that cassette on my little Walkman over and over and over and over again. The songs on the cassette, Bob could tell you as well as I, probably better, but included Moanin', Blue Bossa, Cantaloupe Island, Straight Note Chaser, So What, basically all the classics of the classics that you then learn in Bob's first-year jazz class. And I didn't realize then, but jazz being a language, he was exposing us by ear to the best exemplars of the speakers of this improvisational language. And by listening to this cassette over and over and over again, I had my first exposure to what jazz language sounded and felt like. And not ever anticipating I would try to become a speaker of it myself, I just fell in love with the music because it sounded beautiful and it made me want to dance and made me happy. I didn't even really understand which parts were improvised and which parts weren't. I didn't even understand how it was possible to improvise. I didn't know anything about the African-American history of jazz music. I just listened to the cassette over and over again. And when jazz class started, I guess Bob could speak to this better than me, but I had this feeling of really being in way over my head. Some of the other kids in the class had a background of playing in rock bands, and they had a little bit of improvisational skill. Some had a lot. And I didn't know a chord. I didn't know what a C major chord was. I had no idea how to go about improvising. All I knew was how to play notes on a page. And I was at a total loss, as so many classical musicians are when told that they can play anything they want. How do we know what to play? Luckily, I had an amazing first jazz teacher, and Bob taught us basically to play what we can sing. And little did I realize that that's exactly what Charlie Parker was doing. That's exactly what Herbie Hancock was doing. That's exactly what Joe Henderson's doing and John Coltrane. They're playing what they could sing. And in the same way that I'm speaking to you in the English language, trying to express the thoughts that are in my head, those jazz masters are speaking the jazz language, expressing the melodies that are in their head through their instrument. And the voice singing, either out loud or in your head, is the medium, the intermediate stage between the idea and the expression of the idea. And because we're all bad singers, it's a magnificent way to teach the art of improvisation, because we have to start simple. And the temptation, especially when you're a pianist, you have 88 keys, and 88 to the 88th power possibilities is to play a lot of notes. And learning jazz and learning to improvise in this very, very simple way, based on learning to hear and sing the chord tones of the chords and make little melodies based on those really elementary fundamental materials, is, in fact, little did I realize at the time, not just the best way to learn, but the only effective way to learn. to speak the jazz language, to be a jazz improviser. So I just happened to go to one of the most well-respected prep schools in the country, thinking, my parents were thinking that, this would get me off of the rebellious path and onto the straight and narrow path, but little did they realize that it would turn me into a jazz musician. Not in their wildest nightmare they ever imagined such a thing. So I think it's fair to say that if I hadn't gone to Milton Academy, I never would have discovered jazz. If I had, I certainly wouldn't have discovered it as a player. I would have discovered it as a fan. And every year of high school, I just got more serious about it and more interested. I was just juggling, like all Milton Academy students can attest, juggling homework with sports, with poetry. I was trying to edit the literary magazine, and jazz was one of just many things that I did. I was still playing classical piano, but the older I got, the more serious I wanted to take it, and the more I listened, the more I fell in love. And so I did a jazz senior project, and then I decided to take a gap year, which didn't exist at the time. We didn't know what a gap year was, but I did know that I didn't want to go directly to college, and I thought maybe I'd have a better chance of convincing my parents to let me take a gap year if my proposal for the gap year consisted in going to music school, because it sounded like school. It didn't sound like a gap. It sounded like school before school. So I proposed that, and I got a very strong negative response from my parents, who were afraid that I would not ever get a liberal arts education if I went to music school, which was not an unfair worry on their part. But I was determined. So long story short, I spent a year at the New School, and then I left the New School, which is a jazz conservatory in New York, in Greenwich Village, in 91, 92, and I left in 92, and I came back to Boston. I went to Harvard, and I studied philosophy and psychology. But that 1 year at the New School was the first time in my life that I'd ever done only one thing. Milton Academy students are excellent jugglers, and I knew how to juggle. I did not know how to concentrate on only one thing at a time, and I did not know what was possible if one were to do such a thing. And all of a sudden, I was able to practice and listen to music and go hear my heroes play every night in jazz clubs and jam with my friends and study jazz 24 hours a day and live with jazz musicians who were also doing the same thing. And I got a lot better. My learning curve got a lot steeper, and that year in New York kind of professionalized me. I was starting to do gigs around Manhattan, and the guys I was studying with were starting bands, and I was playing in some of those bands. And by the time I got back to Boston, I already felt like a professional musician. I was 18, but I felt like I had learned so much in that year that I realized that I didn't need to be in music school anymore to continue to play jazz professionally and to improve. I learned between Bob and studying with Jerry Bergonzi and that 1 year in New York, I learned how to teach myself how to improve. So I just continued on that path, and I studied other things on the side, and I was kind of living a double life in college, where I would, take my studies as seriously as I could, and then go hang out with Berklee College of Music students and play at this amazing club in Boston called Wally's Jazz Cafe, Wally's Cafe, on the weekends. And I kind of spent the summers in New York, staying in touch with my New School friends, and played as many gigs as I could. I met Betty Carter at the time when I was 18, and I started doing some work with her, and I was playing with Jerry Bergonzi's band and Bill Pierce's band, some of the nice, amazing Boston musicians. And some of my New York friends were getting better known, and I started to play in their bands, or continue to play in their bands. Jazz club called Smalls opened, and I spent a lot of time playing at Smalls in the early 90s. And long story short, I finished college. I moved to New York. I had trouble paying my rent for the first year. I was driving back and forth between Boston and New York to play my little $50 gigs at Wally's, which used to be $15 gigs when I first did them. I think Wally's paid $15 for about 50 years, and then all of a sudden 15 jumped to 50, and we were all amazed. But we were still playing 5-hour gigs for $50. And but my rent in New York City was $350 when I first moved there. So I could do, 4 weekends at Wally's, $50 a piece, make $400 and just barely pay my $350 rent. If I got one other gig, I could survive. That was my life in New York for the first year. But then a band that I was playing in, Greg Tardy's quintet, got a big record deal, Impulse. I recorded in one of the best studios in New York, and people started to, give me more gigs. I got a lot of opportunities to play with more and more amazing musicians, some of my heroes. And then I started to play with a great saxophone player named Mark Turner, and Joshua Redmond had been roommates with Mark Turner, and Josh so paid close attention to Mark's band, and Josh heard me play with Mark and then invited me to play a session with him. I think he came over to my house, and I called Ruben Rogers, my bass player friend, and pretty soon Ruben and I joined Joshua's band, and that was in I guess I joined first in 1997 and started touring a lot with Joshua. And once you start to go on the road, time moves really fast. But you also improve a lot. And your career has a tendency to take off because suddenly people know who you are and they hear you play with great musicians that they love. And sometimes they want to offer you opportunities to play in their festival or their club. And I started to record with my own trio, and 20 years later, here we are. COVID comes. I don't know. That was a probably long-winded, short summary of my career. Thanks for your patience.
No, that's great. Can you tell people what your degrees are in?
Yeah, I started out in college studying a mixture of philosophy and psychology, as I said, but by the time I graduated, they had invented a new concentration called mind, brain, and behavior. And without realizing it, I had fulfilled all the requirements. So I graduated from Harvard with a degree in mind, brain, and behavior. But I wrote a thesis in the philosophy of mind. I had philosophy advisors and philosophy readers. So I was essentially a student of philosophy of mind, but intersected with neuroscience and cognitive psychology. And then I later on in 2010, I decided to go back to school. Sorry, in 2005, I decided to go back to school and study some more philosophy, and ended up getting a master's in philosophy from Tufts.
And I remember meeting you at the Long Beach IAJE conference when you had a dilemma because you not only had gotten accepted to this prestigious graduate program at Tufts, but you also got invited to play at the Jazz at Lincoln Center orchestra with Wynton Marsalis. And I remember you saying, well, I'm not sure what I should do. And you ended up doing both.
Yeah, that 2005 was probably my busiest and craziest year of juggling. I knew that partly because of Milton Academy and to a lesser degree because of Harvard, I knew that I was good at juggling things. That was the one skill that I had actually developed over my entire life at that point. So I had a feeling that I could juggle those. I didn't know. I didn't know if I could or I couldn't, but I thought it was worth a try. It's hard to say no, to Wynton. It's hard to say no to Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, or Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra is the official name. But actually, the real problem was not juggling the two of those. It was juggling the fact that I was also playing Kurt Rosenwinkel's band. And Kurt Rosenwinkel's a guy that I loved for many years. And he was a friend of mine, and I'd already started playing in his band when I got this opportunity to join Wynton's band. So I was simultaneously taking 3 classes at Tufts, touring with Wynton's quartet and quintet, touring with Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra, and touring with Kurt's quintet. And the master's program at Tufts, I knew a lot of the professors already. I knew my advisor, and they understood my situation. They were willing to let me miss class as long as I wrote my papers and I did all my assignments. So it wasn't so much that I was gone that was the problem. It was that I couldn't be on Kurt's gig and Wynton's gig at the same time. And Wynton was pissed that there was any other gig that I might have committed to that might take precedence over his gig. And they're also stylistically very different, very demanding, precise, specific band leaders. So the music in both cases took a lot of homework, required a lot of homework, required a lot of discipline and hard work to sound good. in two completely different stylistic genres. So actually those two gigs were harder to juggle than the master's program. But especially once I figured out that I didn't have to take 3 classes a semester, there was no reason I needed to finish anytime soon. So I just started taking 1 class a semester, and that made the master's program a lot easier.
Wow. So I have, some other sort of general questions that could lead to discussion, but I'd be more interested in seeing if some of our audience has questions. I also want to acknowledge the amazing jazz legend, not only as a player, certainly that is not in dispute, but also as an educator, one of the pioneers of jazz education, Mr. Dan Hurley. And it's an honor, Dan, to have you on board for this call. So I hope you're doing well.
Did he just disappear? All right, I can't see him.
He was muted.
Oh,
but
okay. I don't know.
Maybe he left. Maybe he had a gig. No, I guess not. There are also some wonderful Milton grads. I see Baron Timus, second in the second year of jazz back in the 70s, and
wow.
DJ Nash we've already acknowledged, and I'm trying to see who else, any grads. Anyway,
Baron, was that the Deval Patrick era of jazz at Milton?
I missed Deval by 1 year.
Okay.
Deval was he graduated. I taught him honors pre-calculus, but he graduated before the jazz program started. Little did I know that his father, was an incredible jazz musician who played with Sun Ra for 30 years, and that his dad played on the Mongo Santa Maria recording of Watermelon Man. He played with John Coltrane. He played with Thelonious Monk. And I just found out, I don't know, about 10 years ago that Deval actually played drums.
Yeah, he plays drums.
Yeah. You remember when you met Deval?
Yeah, in the bathroom of the Charles Hotel near the Regatta Bar.
Yeah.
Men's room, yeah.
Kind of funny.
He wouldn't talk to me these days in COVID times. He wouldn't have conversed in the men's bathroom.
Well, you and I stalked him. We saw go into the bathroom, and when he came, I introduced you to. Anyway, do we have any students or anybody who would like to ask questions? You can chime in either through chat or even better, just unmute yourself and ask Aaron.
I have a really specific question.
Sure.
Why don't you say who you are?
Oh, yeah, I'm Sebastian. I'm a
Hi,
pianist
Sebastian.
at Milton right now. So if I have small hands, how do I stride with tense?
So that's a very specific question.
Yeah.
You do your hand exercises every morning, and you stretch. That's only half joke. So, somehow, my left hand's extension is actually a tiny bit longer than my right. I assume it's just from stretching. So I think the answer is you don't have to. The serious answer is you don't have to play tense. There have been plenty of great jazz musicians that play great solo piano and never played a tenth in their life. They have small hands. I can name you a bunch of them. I just listened to Monty Alexander. He was playing Facebook Live. I don't think he can play a real tenth. Definitely Hiromi doesn't play tenths. But the short and easy answer is you can go ba-doom, ba-doom, instead of boom, you can go ba-doom if you really need to do it. But yeah, there's a lot of other ways you can sound good playing solo piano. There's no rules about tenths. Tenths are not necessary. But that's it. Thanks.
Any other?
I just wanted to say, I'm in LA time, so I have to go to a call. My workday is not over, but I played with you back in the day.
Yes.
And you were not the best.
Definitely not.
And hearing you now and over the years play, it is such an inspiration. And it's sort of like how I tell my kids, like, you're smart if you know something, you're intelligent if you figure something out. And to hear you play now and to know, because I do remember during the beginning, you'd struggle a little bit.
A lot.
And it's just such a great. I'm so happy to connect. So, Cindy, thank you for setting this up, and I hope we can stay in touch because I think about Milton Jazz pretty much every day I go to work. So,
yeah, Cindy, will you send us a group email or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Great to see you.
Okay. Nice to see you.
Thank
Oh,
you.
bye.
Okay.
I-
Well,
I-
I've got some-
Let me second that because he's 1,000% right that jazz did not come easy to me in any way. And as I said, I felt like I was at somewhat of a disadvantage compared to my peers. Not only because I didn't have any background in improvising, but also because I didn't have any ear. I mean, I was not born with perfect pitch. I didn't have much in the way of relative pitch either. I had to basically teach myself everything. I kind of gave myself rudimentary ear training. Bob convinced me that a great way to learn would be to transcribe a solo. So I transcribed a Red Garland solo on Straight Note Chaser. It was the most difficult thing I'd ever done in my life. And it was probably the most useful thing I ever did in my life.
Can I just
But
interject,
it was
Tyler?
hard
Can you
work.
mute yourself?
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay. Sorry, Aaron.
No problem. So yeah, it didn't come easy. Oh, and I don't, most people tend to talk about professional musicians as people that were very talented, and and people say to me all the time things like, "Oh, you're so lucky to have such a gift," or I wish I had talent like you, or something like that. And I always try to answer the truth, which is that I wasn't talented. I was not somebody that, for whom music came easily, especially not jazz music. And I did have a good work ethic, and I did really fall in love with this music. And I think that that's the most important thing of all, is just to find something that you truly love, and then working at it doesn't feel like work. It's pleasure, and improving is extremely rewarding because you care a lot about sounding better, and you're not satisfied with sounding bad because it makes you sad to sound bad and makes you happy to sound better, and that motivates you to work hard until you can sound decent. And I think if I had decided to become a professional basketball player, I would have failed. So it doesn't necessarily apply to everything. You may have limits, even talent limits, or certainly physical limits. But I think where music is concerned, especially jazz, it's really possible to teach yourself how to be good, if not great. And one other thing that's required is to surround yourself with musicians that are better than you. And that was one thing that I think I learned from Bob, and also from Jerry Bergonzi, and just tried to put myself in playing situations where I would be challenged and inspired. And the New School was amazing for that. And New York is amazing for that. And one of the reasons that I got better enough to become a professional musician was that I was always, playing with people that were challenging me and having to rise to the occasion. And that's true of sports too. If you want to, progress as a basketball player or a tennis player, you have to play against people that are better than you, that kick your ass. And I was getting my ass kicked, and that is a term of art in the jazz. Many people kick my ass, including Betty Carter, and like a long list of people that kick my ass, including Bob Sinecro, in a sweet way.
So you a little bit addressed this, but I wondered if you could address it a little more directly. What attracts you to the jazz language? I mean, clearly, just what you described. There are a few people, Kenny Werner, I think, Chris Potter, Jacob Collier, Ben Stepner, who just fell out of the womb and seemed to be able to do it. That wasn't, we mere mortals, have to work at it. And what attracts you to wanted to dive in so deeply to the jazz language?
Well, what I would say is that just in response to the first idea that there's some people that fall out of the womb, doing it. I think that, even somebody like, Joey Alexander, who some of you might know, who's a teenage prodigy, who never had any formal or theoretical training at all. I mean, I understood much more about Joey after I played in Bali this past summer, and I met his former teachers, and where his family comes from, and nobody really taught him much of anything, and he, even to this day, some of my friends play in his band, he doesn't know how to explain anything that he's doing, and it's hard for him even to write out the chord symbols for the tunes that he writes. Everything is by ear. Absolutely everything is by ear. And in the history of jazz, there have been a number of amazing jazz titans who learned like that. And it's a myth that we need to know theory in order to be an eloquent speaker of the jazz language. Just like it's not necessarily to learn grammar before you learn to speak the English language. You can become an eloquent speaker of the English language without knowing any grammar. So, when you do come across a prodigy or somebody for whom it always seemed really easy, or can do superhuman things, or can just learn a lot faster than everybody else, in music, it's always for the same reason. They have great ears. So it's an oral music, it's an oral tradition, and the way you learn it is by listening and copying what you hear. So somebody who has great ears can hear something once, sing it back, play it back, boom. Of course, if you're me at age 14 trying to learn Red Garland solo, it might take 3 months. If you have somebody who can hear it once and play it back, they're going to learn it a lot faster. They're going to become eloquent speakers of the language a lot faster. So, and sometimes you have two kind of superhuman abilities combined in one person. You might have perfect pitch or almost perfect relative pitch, and you might have a photographic memory like Jason Marsalis. So Wynton and Branford's younger brother, Jason, who plays drums, he can sing you back your solo that you played on the gig like 45 minutes ago. So, he'll after a gig, he'll be like, "Yeah, man, I love when you played Peter, that little phrase that you're like, what are you talking about?" He remembers every phrase that you played on every tune, and he'll remember he's playing the gig with you, and his brain is processing all this information and recording it somehow. So, and he happens to have perfect pitch, so he can also whistle it back to you perfectly. So certain things are just easy for certain people, and they mostly have to do with having perfect pitch or perfect relative pitch and extremely good pitch memory. So the combination of those two things gives people phenomenal superhuman skills, one or the other or both. Christian McBride is another guy who has incredible photographic memory. Herbie supposedly has a great photographic memory. I haven't tested it. They all have phenomenal ears. So there's certain talents that do make it easier for certain people to learn faster than other people. But you can train yourself in all those things as well. And most of the jazz musicians I know do not have perfect pitch. Definitely don't have perfect, amazing pitch memory like that, or photographic memory. They acquired it by hard work. And I now teach ear training, and I watch students develop their ears, and I think about how to help them develop their ears. And I was one of those students. It helps me to teach them because it didn't come naturally to me. And there's always one or two people in the class with perfect pitch, and it's hard for me to teach them anything. Obviously, there's not much that they need to learn, but it's also not the case that they're better than the other students in the class. Their perfect pitch has not translated into more eloquent speaking of the language. So to finally answer Bob's question, what attracted me to the language? I mean, I think the first thing that attracted me was just the possibility of being able to improvise music at all. As a classically trained student of Western music, I just didn't know it was even possible. It hadn't occurred to me yet that I improvise every time I open my mouth. It hadn't occurred to me yet that I improvise every day of my life, as do all of us. Life is one big improvisation, and speaking is one big improvisation as well. And we can also speak in different languages. So, of course, it's only mind-boggling if you learn music in a traditional, classical way where you're learning to read notes off of a page. But I was one of those kids, so I was mind-boggled at just the possibility of it. So it attracted me that in the sense that it was a puzzle that needed to be solved. How was this possible? And was it really true? I mean, I was a skeptic. I mean, I wasn't a cynic, but I was a skeptic. Is it really true that Charlie Parker and Miles Davis and John Coltrane, are they really improvising all that stuff? Of course, the answer is yes, but I had to figure out how it was possible. So that was the first part of it that attracted me. And then I think in a way that I didn't understand at the time, and I still don't understand because it's a mysterious and beautiful thing, I was moved. The fact that jazz music is African-American music, it's the product of African-American experience, and most of the geniuses of the music lived as Black Americans in the 20th century. It gives the music a certain kind of profundity and emotional depth that I hadn't heard in the pop music that my friends were listening to, and I was exposed to at the time. It was just emotionally deeper, and of course rhythmically deeper than any music that I had been exposed to yet. So I think I was just I fell in love for those reasons that are hard to articulate, but do have to do with the history of the way the music was made in this country, and all the difficulties that these great geniuses lived through and brought to their art form, put into the music.
And as you have been into it now for decades, does the music carry you even deeper, as you grow and evolve? Is your appreciation and satisfaction?
Yeah, I mean, it's a setup of a question. I think that at a certain point, when you commit to doing something for your life, as not just your art, but your profession, not just something you love, but your identity, the degree of investment goes up and up and up. I mean, I care about this music for so many different reasons now, and so many of them are fundamental to who I am as a person. I have an artistic voice, that is something that I'm constantly searching for and trying to build, trying to construct, and that's a magical process in and of itself. How do you decide what you want to sound like? Because it's one thing to try to sound good, it's another thing to try to sound like yourself and good. Especially because the process of learning to sound good involves imitating your heroes and the masters that came before you, and then the process of becoming an artist is the process of becoming yourself and sounding different from everybody that came before you. So that's a very interesting and difficult, wonderful transition to go through, where you start looking, instead of outward and listening outward, you start looking and listening inward. And it's made easier by the process of playing with others, your peers. They help you in this process to discover who you are. And a lot of playing helps you to discover who you are, in the same way that a lot of speaking helps you to discover who you are, and a lot of thinking helps you to discover who you are, and a lot of feeling helps you to discover who you are. But that process becomes hyper personalized when you take it on as a life, journey, a life goal. But then there's also the social part of it, and there's even like the socio-political part of it, and the kinds of friendships that I've built over my life would not have been possible if I hadn't become a jazz musician. The group of my intimate friends is much, much more diverse than it would have been if I had chosen a different profession, for example. And my knowledge of the world is also a lot broader, hopefully also deeper, than it would have been if I'd chosen another profession, because my life is, traveling with a small number of other human beings around the world, playing music for people from all different places and with all different backgrounds, and talking to and getting to know all those people. And my, brothers in my band, we joke that we spent, more time together than any of us has spent with our respective wives or girlfriends or parents. And though, most of the guys I play with are not from a similar background as me, and that's also a beautiful thing.
Got a question. Oh,
Go ahead.
okay, so Aaron, I'm wondering if you can think of ways that all the diverse interests that you've had and that you studied in college, how they may tie in or may feed into your to some things about your musical style and maybe your maybe your work ethic, but more. I guess I'm thinking of just some things that draw you in musically, and how those might be related to some of the other things that you studied.
Yeah, that's a good question, and always a difficult one to answer. I think that, as I was just trying to articulate, who I am as a musician is, of course, closely related to who I am as a person. So everything that has interested me, for sometimes mysterious reasons in my life outside of music, is in some way affecting all my musical decisions, because of this process of looking inward and trying to figure out what I like about my own playing, what I don't like, what I want to develop, what I want to discard, what I took from someone else that feels like it's fundamentally part of me, what I took from someone else that feels like it's no longer a part of who I am. And when you travel a lot and when you play with a lot of different kinds of musicians with a lot of different skills, you're constantly exposed to everything that inspired them and everything that, is deep, for example, about Brazilian culture, or is deep about West African culture, or is deep about Haitian culture. These are opportunities when things move you to incorporate these elements into your own musical voice. And everybody that you play with, especially on a regular basis, becomes a part of you, a part of your musical voice, and a part of your life, because it's impossible to play music with people that you don't love, as people. So you kind of fall in love with your musical partners over and over again until you fall out of love with them, and you have divorces. So the people that move you, the people that interest you, and their interests invariably affect you along the way. And of course, you have this choice every time you encounter something new, which is, do I incorporate this, or do I ignore this? Do I even reject this? And why you choose to incorporate certain things, why they move you, and why other ones, let's say, offend you or don't interest you, is often a mysterious truth about you that you're not even in touch with at the time, right? So, in my many journeys, why was I so moved by, Brazilian music or Haitian music, more than, say, Mexican music or Argentinian music, right? I mean, these are mysterious questions. I don't have the answers to them, but they do have something fundamental to do with who I am as a person, and therefore as a musician. Regarding what I studied, people ask me sometimes, like, oh, you study some analytic philosophy, how does that change your music? How does that affect the way you play? And I think that it may not be so much that, studying philosophy of mind or epistemology affects my playing, but rather the part of me that's interested in philosophy of mind or epistemology is something that is also affecting the way that I play. So there's something fundamental, maybe, about the way my brain works that is attracted to a question like, what am I? What is the relationship between my brain and my consciousness? What is the self? These kind of questions what is the solution to the mind-body problem? That, questions that make me passionately excited to study philosophy, also in some way maybe affect my playing. Like, how is it possible to improvise? Can I really have no idea what I'm about to play and play something great? How is that? Can I hear everything that the bass player and the drummer and the saxophone player are doing and make instantaneous decisions on the level of a millisecond about what to play and what not to play based on everything that they're playing with no preconceptions? so these kind of, the challenges of being a great jazz musician are related to these sort of impossible challenges of answering these impossible questions. And why am I attracted to those challenges? It's something fundamental to do with me, right? That is guiding maybe both of those journeys. The other thing I would say about philosophy that has profoundly affected me is that it's made me a better teacher and a better, let's say, tried to help me get to a clear understanding of how I myself learned this music and what's the right way to teach it to other people in an effective way. I mean, a lot of the way that I teach has to do with the way that I learned from Bob, and also to a lesser degree from Jerry Bergonzi, but some of it just has to do with, studying philosophy teaches you how to recognize bullshit and self-deception, and puts you on the lookout for your own self-deceptions, and really makes you kind of push yourself to come to clear explanations and true explanations, and not settle for, the first thing that pops into your head. And I think it's been a interesting journey teaching students and hearing the way that they've, been studying with other teachers who maybe haven't tried to get to that deeper understanding of their own skill development, right? It's one thing to become good, it's another thing to be able to help somebody else become good, and also analyze what they need, because every student has different, as Bob can tell you, every student has different skills, strengths, and weaknesses, and you can't give everybody the same, medicine. If you're a doctor, each drug needs to be prescribed for the person that needs that thing. And I think studying philosophy and trying to get to rigorous question asking and question answering has helped me become a better teacher. I don't know if that was a good enough answer.
It was certainly profound. This is amazing. I'm mindful of, I don't want to keep you or especially our students, some of whom have another class, believe it or not, tonight.
Wow.
But I want to go about 10 more minutes if we could.
Sure.
We've had a couple of requests for you to play something. In fact, the specific request was either a sea shanty or lambada. You can imagine who that's from.
I can't play anything at the moment because I'm here in the bedroom of my parents' house on Cape Cod, and they're eating dinner downstairs where the piano is. so that I cannot do that, but I can take other requests that do not require me to play the piano.
We had
but not singing, no singing.
But you were in Milltones, weren't you?
Yes, believe it or not, I was.
Yeah.
That was the pinnacle of my singing career, high school. I was also in the chamber singers.
That's right. So two things that I'd like you to address, and then there was a question that if you could stay a few minutes after, 10 minutes, might be a little bit more personalized question from one of our guests here. But one of the things, as somebody who, has known you and loves you and cares about you deeply, I'm so impressed and so grateful for the way you use your music in service of humanity. Many of you may not know this, but Aaron has been amazingly generous in places like Haiti and Angola, he's also used his music in Palestine, and I'm sure there's a lot of others I don't know about. And he's also used his music to further political people that he believed in, doing some fundraisers, I remember, for some of our political candidates. And could you address that and also save some time to talk about performance anxiety?
Sure.
10 minutes.
Yeah, I think jazz music has always been political. I think any great artist is trying to communicate with his community, his world or her world. And jazz musicians in particular, as I mentioned earlier, famously faced quite unbelievable challenges in the simple sense that they were second or third class citizens in their own countries, and yet they were producing the greatest art that their countries had ever known, and yet they were treated extraordinarily poorly on a regular basis. It's hard for us to even imagine exactly what that was like at the degree that those guys had to deal with it at the time. And there is a connection between their profound contributions to humanity and the profound obstacles that they faced. So I don't think that there's ever been a time when jazz musicians were not politically engaged with the problems of their time. Now, the problems of our time are, some of them are similar, but some of them are different. And, you know, we have to stay engaged even in periods of time when, I mean, this is an interesting period. When I first, let me go back a little bit. When I had first felt like I needed to try to get the jazz community to come together and give a fundraiser and play for a fundraiser for John Kerry, that was 2004. There was a certain kind of apathy, and there were a lot of jazz musicians, including African-American jazz musicians, who felt like jazz shouldn't be political, which was kind of shocking to me. But there were a lot of people that refused to play because they didn't want to be seen as taking a partisan stance. And then there were other people that were just apolitical. They just felt like the two parties were the same, and it didn't make a difference whether we had George Bush or John Kerry as our president. This is after the Iraq War. So that was profoundly shocking to me. I mean, how did we arrive at this point when people had forgotten the 1960s, I mean, or the 1940s and 50s? I mean, that was really surprising. And I think that now, with this current president and this current political climate, and you know, the rise of the far right and white supremacism and you know, right supremacists and things that we kind of thought we had left behind maybe 15 years ago, and certainly in the Obama era, now they're back in full force. And I think people are hyper politicized. My jazz friends, my community are hyper politicized. But it wasn't that long ago that we had developed a certain kind of apathy. So now I think it's much easier to get people to engage, and in COVID times, I think more than ever, partly because people have a lot of time in their hands, and secondly because they're just incredibly frustrated and sad at the way that our country has responded and our government has responded. And performance anxiety is a strange transition, but I don't know. Did I answer that question sufficiently?
Yeah, but I just want to, you know, commend you, you know, as another human being who just for your love and concern about others, your selflessly service, you know, and you know, I'm sure there are other places, but I mean, the work that you have done in Haiti and Angola and the Middle East and political candidates, I mean, it's really a gift. So
let me just say one thing, because I often thank Bob, I often thank Cindy for all that he's done for me personally, but I also have to say that no offense to all the jazz students that are here listening, I was you, but it takes an extraordinary amount of patience to listen to high school jazz musicians day in, day out for 46 years and continue to selflessly give to each one of those students to make them better, and continue to love this music to the level necessary to listen to all those student jazz musicians struggling to get better day in, day out for 46 years. I cannot think of a job that requires more selflessness and more patience and more love of jazz. So whatever small things I've done in my life, you know, on the political side, I do not think are remotely comparable to your day in, day out generosity. But I thank you for your warm words. But thank you.
Yeah.
But let me just say one quick thing. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
You still get nervous?
So, yeah. I get nervous when there's a situation that, how can I say, that challenges me in such a way that I am not sure that I can pull it off, you know? So there are such situations, you know, in particular, most of the times that I've felt the most nervous in my professional career have to do with having to play something that is more like a crossover between jazz and classical music. So, for example, if you know, if you're playing with an orchestra with Josh or with Winton, or you know, and there's a lot of written material that has to be perfect. You know, that it's not improvised. You know, the improvised parts, I'm fine, but it brings me back to the stress of playing classical music in front of an audience when every note needs to be exactly right and you cannot make any mistakes. And if you do, you're screwed and everybody will know. And, you know, all these reasons that I would never, ever want to be a classical musician, and all the reasons that classical musicians practice 8, 9, 10, 12 hours a day so that they don't make mistakes, those can come flooding back even in a sort of semi-jazz setting when there's a lot of written material that needs to be perfect. So, and I've been shocked at how cool, calm, and collected I felt until literally 5 seconds before I had to play something totally exposed and totally written, and all of a sudden I get this nervous feeling like I was 12 years old. And that can come out of nowhere, and that's very stressful, and it just reminds me that I'm happy that I'm not a classical musician. And I had an experience that hadn't happened in a while, but I had an experience recently where I've been teaching a little bit in Finland at this conservatory, and they gave me an honorary degree, and as part of the honorary degree I had to play with their orchestra, Sibelius, you know, Conservatory Orchestra. And I was prepared. I mean, I prepared a lot. I knew the piece. It was an arrangement of a piece that I had written. I mean, come on. But something about wearing a tuxedo in front of the orchestra and having these notes in front of me. I mean, I played in front of audiences 50 times bigger than that, and I've even worn tuxedo. But it's that classical music environment that makes things stressful and the need not to make any mistakes. Jazz is rarely something that makes me nervous, but it's probably because I just have a lot of experience with it, and also because I know that one skill that I developed over the years is you know, making mistakes sound good. I mean, there are no mistakes, as Herbie Hancock says. He says, I intentionally try to make mistakes. So, you know, it's not that everything you play is equally good. It's not. But there's also not a mistake, except for, of course, when you're playing a written out part. But usually when you're playing a written out part with your friends, it's, you know, there's no real damage done if somebody plays a wrong note. And I've also played with so many amazing musicians, you know, from Wynton Marsalis and Josh Redman and Betty Carter, where everybody made mistakes. I mean, I've heard the absolute most incredible musicians make mistakes. I've even heard some incredible classical musicians make mistakes. But yeah, I think jazz doesn't make me nervous, except on rare occasions if I feel like I'm not at my best for some physical or physiological or mental reason. You know, like, for example, if I haven't slept, or I don't know, I'm sick, or, you know, especially if it's a solo piano situation, I really have to be at my cognitive best and musical best. And if I feel like for whatever reasons, you know, it happened recently, like I didn't sleep, I flew across the country, I played a solo piano concert, and things that I can normally do, I couldn't do. And that made me nervous. I wasn't nervous before I started, but I started to get nervous in the middle of the concert when I realized that things that normally are not hard were hard. And then you can start to panic and feel like you don't have any skills anymore. That's not fun. But normally I don't get nervous. But I mean, actually, there's one more time when I sorry, do we have time?
Yeah, go ahead.
There's one more thing I can say. Yeah, the only thing, people get nervous, jazz musicians included, when we have to play in front of other famous or well-respected jazz musicians. So, if I had to play in front of Herbie Hancock one time, or Cedar Walton, or Mulgrew Miller, or some of my heroes. And the first time I had to do those things, I was very nervous because, like everybody, I wanted to sound good. And I experienced this with students. They take a lesson and the students want to sound good, and they're nervous because they're afraid of not sounding good in front of their teacher. But, what I try to tell students is, if you sound too good, there's nothing I can teach you. So I hope that you should also hope that you sound bad so that I can teach you something. And as my friend Greg Tardy said, you're only as good as you sound on your worst day, which I wouldn't say, but I'd say you're only as good as you sound on your average day. So you can never sound that much better than you are and that much worse than you are. So at the end of the day, when you're taking a lesson, it's kind of like playing a concert. Your job is just to sound like you. People come to hear you. And that's all you need to do. Just do your job, sound like yourself. And if it's a lesson, you'll get some constructive criticism. If it's a gig, people will like you, people won't like you. Cedar Walton or Herbie Hancock, hopefully they'll like me, but if they don't, nothing's going to change in my life. I can't, the real lesson is that I can't make myself sound better than I am anyway. So there's no reason to be nervous.
Well, on behalf of everyone, I want to just thank you. This has been fantastic for me, and I'm sure for our students and our friends who joined us. And you've just been so generous with not only your time, but with your opening your soul and your heart and sharing and being, very honest. And I'm sure it's very inspiring to all of us. So thanks to everybody who's joined us.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Aaron. And God bless everybody. Stay safe and healthy.
Have a good night,
Thanks, you
everyone.
too.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Bob.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you, guys. My pleasure. Thanks. Good luck, everyone.
Oh, I just wanted to ask one more quick question. So that first solo
Aaron,
that
did you
you ever
leave?
transcribed, the Red Garland one, I'm assuming it's the one on Milestones, right?
Yes. Yes,
Um,
exactly. The one on
So did you know, I just learned this, that solo was actually Red Garland's transcription of Miles Davis's solo from Now's the Time in like
Sebastian,
1945 or something.
I'm going to send that to Aaron because I thought of it when he was talking. But tell him about it.
Oh, okay.
So sorry.
I spliced the excerpts from both recordings, and so I will send that to Aaron. I sent it to Jamie Abersol too.
Yeah,
So
Can
Aaron,
you explain what you said again? No, I didn't understand.
yeah. So the solo that you said you transcribed, like the first solo you transcribed, the Red Garland Straight No Chaser solo. Apparently, or not apparently, like I heard this. There's this Miles Davis recording of Now's the Time from like 10 years before they recorded that, and Miles Davis's solo on that is exactly the same as Red Garland's, and Red Garland just transcribed that solo and played it in block chords, which I thought was really funny.
Right, but you're not talking about the whole solo. You're just talking about the part of the solo that's in block
just the
chords.
block chord part. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that I know. Yeah, that I know. No, that I know. I gotta know. I mean,
okay.
yeah. Well, I mean, I'd heard that. I mean, I know the part of the solo you were talking about, and I know the recording of Now's the Time because Miles' solo on Now's the Time is very unusual. It doesn't sound like bebop. It doesn't sound like Charlie Parker. It doesn't sound like Dizzy Gillespie. In a way, it's that's a historic solo for Miles because it's the first solo that he takes where you can really tell that he's not trying to sound like Dizzy.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a totally different melodic concept than Dizzy, and it's not. Miles talks about not being able to play high notes like Dizzy. It's not even about that. He's not even trying to play high notes. He's developed something totally different, and I think that kind of you can put yourself in the shoes of people that heard that were, familiar with Dizzy and Cootie Williams and Bird. expecting something with that vocabulary, and Miles comes and plays a solo on the blues. It doesn't sound like the blues, and it doesn't sound like bebop. And that's a shock for people. That's Miles saying, all right, I got some new shit for you. And I'm 100% sure that Red Garden was one of those guys that was like, hey, what was that? Like, and then learned it and kind of like, probably as an inside joke, for Miles, like played it on the recording. I mean, it's probably something that Red Garland prepared as a kind of joke.
So do you think that Miles, so that recording was in 1945, and the album that Red Garland played on was 1958. I'm wondering if Miles realized at the time that Red was playing a solo.
Probably did. I'm pretty sure he did, because that solo was so unusual, and it also is so different from what the rest of the Red solo. Right? Like Red goes into that thing, and it's so different. I mean, Red Garland does play block chord solos on a lot of albums, but he never plays anything like that. I'm sure Miles, not sure, but I'm pretty sure he knew. Yeah, but that's cool. You guys
What would you guess,
figured
Miles?
that out, Sebastian.
Miles have been amused or flattered or angry, or any idea?
No, flattered. I mean, flattered. Flattered meaning like, I mean, Miles, not flattered because Red Garland was just his piano player, but like smiling at, like, in the way that Wynton. So, for example, when I started to play with Wynton, his manager gave me a shopping bag full of like 60 Wynton CDs, and she was like, "Yeah, Wynton wants you to learn the music on these CDs." With no music, no sheet music, just 60 CDs. And I literally came home on the subway. I remember like carrying this heavy bag, and it was going to break because there were so many CDs in it. I didn't even know he made 60 CDs. I mean, I don't know, maybe it was 50, but it was an extraordinarily high number. And like, it was totally hopeless for me at that time, trying to go to grad school and play in Kurt's band and, learn Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra music, which was written out, and, the music for the quintet, to also learn all these songs on these CDs. But sure enough, I mean, there were quartet gigs where Wynton just started playing tunes, and like tunes, his own original tunes from, I didn't know which CD, and we were on the gig and I didn't know the tune. And it wasn't a standard, it was like an original tune of his that he just expected me to know, because he was like, "Didn't you give me those CDs?" I was like, "Yeah, but there's like 50 CDs and there's like 10 tunes on each CD. That's like 500 songs I have to learn by ear. Like, I don't know which ones he's gonna play." And he was kind of pissed, but I mean, he was in a tough situation because his piano player had left, and I got the gig because I played with the drummer a lot, Ali, and Wynton knew me from playing with Josh, and we played basketball, and he didn't have time to like teach somebody 500 songs, so he just was like, "All right, do you want this gig? Learn these songs." And at the end, he had to kind of tell me which songs we were actually going to play, because of course he's not going to play all 500 songs. That's just ego, right? So that's any band leader wants the guys in the band to appreciate the gig and to feel like they're lucky to have the gig. And one way they can show that is by learning all the band leaders' music. And even I've had some bass players that came and learned. I don't have 50 CDs, so it's easier for them, but they learned four CDs worth of my tunes by ear because they wanted the gig. And I mean, I was flattered, and it was badass. And in one case, the guy did get the gig. I mean, but that, there's other things that would make me want to hire a bass player besides that. And ultimately, I feel like that's true of Wynton too. Like, as much as he wants that for ego reasons, that's not really his number one priority. Having somebody that devoted. But yeah, anyway, sorry I got on this topic, but the point was whether Miles felt flattered. I think he probably felt like Red Garland was showing him the proper respect by doing that.
Okay.
Yeah, I wonder if it was a little
thank
bit
you
of an
so much.
inside joke too.
Yeah.
It was definitely an inside joke, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
I'm very grateful
you.
to Sebastian for, I've been so fortunate to be around so many people who have such wisdom, especially David Baker and Jamie and people like that. That's the first and I've listened to both recordings, but I never
thought about that.
together. So that's
Yeah,
really,
yeah. Yeah,
Just
good for you for sleuthing that out. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, I gotta
All
go
right.
biology, Mr. Sin.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you so
Have a
much.
good class. Thanks, man.
Thanks.
Good luck.
Aaron, thank you so much. Really, this
My
was
pleasure, Cindy. It was
great.
fun.
It was great. It was, you lead an interesting life, my friend.
Hey, man, thank you so much for everything you've done for me and for all these amazing kids. And yeah, I meant every word that I said. Like, you amaze me. Your job has got to be one of the toughest on the planet, and you fucking kick ass. And thank you for. I'm just lucky that I met you, and Maddie and AJ and Weemeyer we were all kind of laughing about that too, like how much infinite patience you have.
Well,
But yeah, David Nash.
oh man, have you seen this show?
I haven't seen it. I got to see it.
It's on. I guess it's on demand now, but it's a terrific show, and I had no knowledge, but he had apparently other shows on national television that weren't quite as successful. But man, he's hit it big, and he brought 6 of the cast to Boston in March, and it was something for Boston University. And Franny and I got to go, and it was a thrill. But it's an excellent show, and it deals with a lot of issues, especially depression. In the first 15 minutes of the first, yeah, if you watch it, you need to go back to show 1, episode 1.
So tell me where do I find it?
If you go to ABC, maybe on demand. In fact, I just saw like 2 hours ago, because I'm looking to hope there's a 3rd season of it. It's you probably can
ABC
get
on
it.
demand. Okay.
Yeah, or just do search for A Million Little Things season 1 or something. But it's extremely well written, and he even has some public service announcements at the end of some of the early shows about depression. And how it's nothing to be ashamed of, and it's something you can get treated for. And again, he's using his art in terms of service. And he wrote the show. The title came from one of his neighbors. They had a casual encounter. Just, how are you doing? Oh, great. And then a week later, the guy committed suicide. And
Wow.
DJ was very impacted by that, and that's how he came up with the sort of the concept of the show. And he did a webinar a week ago with middle school students, and he knows when he does a series, he knows how it's going to end.
Right. Sure. Yeah.
And whether it be 1 season or 7 seasons.
Right. All right. They have the whole thing planned out, and then they go and film the individual episodes. Yeah.
And it was remarkable how the actors were talking about how DJ keeps them in the dark. He doesn't want them to know what's going to happen. So, for instance, somebody who was a villain.
Sorry.
Someone who was a villain in the first few episodes actually became somebody that you really admired and were attracted to as a human being. But the first shows that the person was kind of like ostracized. So he's always talking, and he talked about, a lot of writing techniques, flipping, where you get set up to expect this is going to happen and the opposite happens, and how, in the first 2 minutes before they roll the credits, I forget what he called it, but they've got to hook you in. Just all these little things that, but he talked about how he was in a line at Costco, and somebody in front of him was, only had a few things in the cart, but the person in front of that person only had a few dozen eggs, and then her spouse cut the line with a crate, one of those big crates of incredible stuff. And so the guy in front of DJ said, excuse me, but, he said, this guy just cut. And he said, well, that's my husband. She said, that's my husband. And he said, well, there's some social contract that we have here. I got in this line because I was going to be the shorter time period of line. And, you just did this. And they got in this big argument. And then the husband said, well, okay, you can cut in front of us. And then DJ and this guy who moved up in the line started talking about them as if they weren't there. Said, boy, that guy's going to pay a price when he gets home and all that. He put that in his show. And he keeps a journal he carries around in his pocket. And every little thing like that, he uses as potential material in the show. It was fascinating for me to hear about all this, the process of writing.
So he doesn't go by David anymore. He goes by DJ only.
Yeah. I think he did that because when he went to Brown, actually he said he was playing a gig at one of the dorms with the Hathaway House, I guess, and somebody broke a string in the band, and so while they were trying to replace their string, there was a dead time, and so David got up and started telling jokes, and that's what got him started to be a comedian. And when he went to Brown, he was apparently doing comedy. When he graduated, he went to New York and became a comedian, and then he started writing comedy, and then he got at the Montreal Comedy Festival, somebody from Hollywood said, I like the way you do your comedy. You would be a good writer, when you moved to Hollywood. And so he started writing for TV shows, and then he started, I think he said 3 or 4 TV shows, but certainly none successful. The one he talked about to the middle schoolers was about his dad. I don't know if you knew this at all, but his dad is blind. And at the age 45, he decided to go to law school.
Wow.
45, and he became a lawyer.
Wow, cool.
So the show was about a blind lawyer.
Nice.
But the very start of the show, which I haven't seen, you see this guy going out with a, what do you call it? A saw where you do a chainsaw, and going out and chopping down a tree. And then later you find out he's blind. So he said he purposely did that so you wouldn't feel like, well, this is a blind guy. I feel sorry for him.
Right.
Anyways, all these little things was pretty fascinating. Anyway.
So does he still play drums?
He said he was extremely disappointed that he was not be able to come back for his reunion next month to play drums. And he said he wanted to play with me. He said he wanted to kick my butt. His younger brother.
Well, yeah, if you could send me.
I'll send you some links.
Yeah, or just send me. Sorry,
I lost you. I'll send you a link to his show. He gave me an amazing shout out on this. I was in an airplane, and it was just like, what? It's a complete surprise. He's
That's
a pretty
awesome.
cool dude. And his nephew is coming to Milton as a freshman.
Okay, great. Can you send me his email too, so I can stay in touch with him?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right, Aaron, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. It was super fun. Franny, I can't see you, but I guess you might be there somewhere. Yeah.
Really?
I don't know. There was no video on Scanlan Design the whole time, but
Oh, that's
she's
Francis.
also muted. That I can. Right, that's what I'm saying. I could see you, but I couldn't see Francis. I was just saying, bye, Francis, if you're there, because I couldn't.
It was our computer upstairs, but she was actually standing next to me.
Hi, Aaron.
Oh, okay.
She's
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
Oh, there you
I
are.
think
Hi.
he's-